Following is a special presentation from 6 News. As the campaign rhetoric comes to a close, one critical step remains. 6 News provides one last look at the candidates, their viewpoints on issues, and what your choice will mean for the future. This is Campaign 2016. Your vote, their views.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Sherry Jones. The future of our country, our Congress, our local courts, and the departments that keep your family safe are all hanging in the balance. Over the next hour, you'll see a series of reports from our 6 News team, get analysis from local experts on what's at stake, and most importantly, you'll hear from the candidates themselves on why they deserve your vote. And we begin our coverage looking at a presidential race unlike any we've ever seen. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have blasted each other for months now. Both claim their rival is unfit to lead our country. Clinton calls Trump dangerous, worries about him being in control of nuclear weapons, and says he demeans women. Trump says Clinton is crooked and a criminal. He said he would try to put her in jail for using a private email server as Secretary of State, and claims Clinton was weak on terrorism during her time in the White House. Both candidates have made lots of stops here in Michigan. Trump has been in places like Flint, Novi, and Dimondale over the past few months. He made a memorable pitch to African American voters during his stop in Dimondale back in August.
I say it again, what do you have to lose? Look, what do you have to lose? You're living in poverty. Your schools are no good. You have no jobs. 58% of your youth is unemployed. What the hell do you have to lose?
Clinton has been in the Detroit area a handful of times. She was there last month, just days after an Access Hollywood tape was released showing Trump making sexually charged comments about women.
And on Friday, the whole world heard him talking about the terrible way he treats women. And last night, when he was pressed about how he behaves, he just doubled down on his excuse.
So the candidates have taken aim at each other's character, but they've also pushed back on their rivals' policies. Let's look at how their plans for the economy could affect your family. Local political experts say Trump is basing his economic vision on policies that have worked well in the past. That means there wouldn't necessarily be new tax codes. Instead, it would be turning back the clock to what things used to be. Hillary Clinton places her focus on making the people with the highest incomes pay more in taxes and putting an emphasis on education. Trump made a stop in Grand Rapids on Halloween and blasted Clinton's economic policies, blaming Democrats for auto jobs leaving Michigan. Clinton says Trump's policies would crush the middle class and says Trump has a long history of being sued over his company's business practices. We turn now to another angle on how the new president could impact your finances. This time, we're talking taxes. Experts say one of the biggest differences between the candidates is how taxes would impact upper middle class families. Michigan State University economics professor Charles Ballard says if you make $100,000 a year, you would have a tax cut under Trump's plan. But taxes would rise if Clinton's plan goes into effect. Clinton has vowed to close loopholes that can be used by the wealthiest Americans to pay less taxes. Trump promises a 20% tax cut for the middle class, but says he would not raise taxes on the top earners. Another major issue both candidates have sparred on is their foreign policy. Trump says Clinton failed during her time as Secretary of State, while Clinton has said it's dangerous for Trump to be in control of our country's nuclear arsenal. Justin Cree has an in-depth look at both sides' views.
For almost 70 years, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, has been in existence. We protect the nations that are a part of the pact. In response, they protect us. But at what cost? Both candidates agree NATO is costing the U.S. far more than the other countries. The topic of cost was mentioned at the latest NATO summit.
That should be the model of NATO in the future, where everyone plays its part. But if the more you attack the institution, the harder it is for these allies to go along with you.
Donald Trump has said he looks at NATO from a businessman aspect.
We pay approximately 73% of the cost of NATO. It's a lot of money to protect other people. But I'm all for NATO.
But I said they have to focus on terror also, and they're going to do that. I think we have to get NATO to go into the Middle East with us, in addition to surrounding nations, and we have to knock the hell out of ISIS.
Clinton is looking to continue the ways NATO can help us, especially when dealing with our Muslim allies.
We're working with NATO, the longest military alliance in the history of the world, to really turn our attention to terrorism. We're working with our friends in the Middle East, many of which, as you know, are Muslim majority nations. We need to be cooperating with Muslim nations and with the American Muslim community. They're on the front lines. They can provide information to us that we might not get anywhere else.
According to Zealer, Trump focuses more on cost, Clinton focuses more on the ties with the other NATO nations.
Clinton seems to be very traditional in her approach that NATO is a good thing for the U.S., the disproportionate costs we can deal with, and we can work with our allies to get them to pay for more.
When dealing with NATO, the follow-up questions for the candidates is oftentimes terrorism in the Middle East and how each candidate would deal with ISIS.
One of my first acts as president will be to establish a commission on radical Islam, which will include reformist voices in the Muslim community who will hopefully work with us.
Clinton thinks fighting ISIS involves more strategy through technology rather than sending troops in.
I don't think it's the smartest way to go after ISIS. I think it gives ISIS a new recruitment tool if we get back in the fight. I think we have to have as our objective their defeat. I think you have to fight them in the air, you have to fight them on the ground, and you have to fight them in cyberspace.
Zealer says Clinton's rhetoric on the Middle East is less vilifying than Trump's rhetoric. But the Middle East is an issue that neither candidates have a solid stance on.
In the U.S., we're able to deal with extremism and terrorism a bit better. It shocks us. It's always horrible, but we're able to bounce back. We have good society, civil society, economic and political systems that can handle it. But there's a lot of fighting, and the question is, who is our ally? Who do we work with?
When it comes to NATO and the tensions in the Middle East, both candidates have said that the safety of Americans will be their #1 priority. Here for you, Justin Cree, 6 News.
There's been a lot of time for both sides to make their case to you, and we've been updating you on who people in Michigan plan to vote for. The latest poll numbers show Hillary Clinton is still holding a lead in our state. In a 4-way race, including third-party candidates, Clinton polls at 41% statewide. That's a 7% lead over Trump. It's a comfortable margin for Clinton, but it's a 4-point slip from a poll taken a month ago. Donald Trump has repeatedly says he does not believe in poll results and claims the election could be rigged. According to the most recent poll here in Michigan, more than 1/3 of people agree, saying they're not confident the results won't be fixed. We spoke to Michigan Secretary of State Ruth Johnson for her take on people's concerns that the election could be corrupt.
For 2 weeks, the county canvasses, and they make sure every precinct matches. If they don't, the local clerks have to come in and show why it's one off. Even if there's a 10,000 vote different, they still have to show that. We don't have this giant computer somebody can hack into at the state, and we've done many things to make sure we're going to have integrity in our elections.
So you just heard from Michigan's top election official, but we wanted the experts' take on how this lack of confidence in the voting process could have a ripple effect after the election. We turned to Face the Nation host John Dickerson for his reaction.
Well, it may be something the next president has to just deal with, because, of course, the next president's going to have a lot of other issues on their plate immediately. But the notion that there's a permanent portion of America that is against or that is doubtful of the legitimacy of the person in office is a real challenge, in the sense that it just keeps a portion of the country agitated about the new president and makes it hard to have a honeymoon. The real thing to watch is, no matter who wins, what pressure the supporters of the other party put on their members in Congress in terms of working with that new president. Will they see any attempt by those members of Congress on the losing side to work with a new president as some kind of an affront to the party, and that'll be really what'll affect the next presidency.
Turning now to another angle from recent polls. Some people say they're not voting for a candidate. Instead, they're voting against Clinton or Trump. Of the 30% of people polled who said they were voting against Trump, the number one reason they say they're doing it is because they feel he is not qualified to be president. As for those voting against Clinton, they cite concerns that she is a liar, crook, or criminal. We've been bringing you expert analysis of these polls from the president of the local firm that conducts them. Our Lauren Thompson is here for you now with reaction from a local pollster as to how the most recent data could shape the outcome of the election here in Michigan.
Well, that's right. Bernie Porn from Epic MRA is here with us today to take a deeper look into the numbers. And first of all, let's talk about timing. Now, the election is very close, and with the polls showing Hillary Clinton with a 7-point lead at this point, does that pretty much say that she will win Michigan, you think?
Well, unless something dramatic happens, obviously with the FBI revelation, we're trying to find out to what extent that may cause her to lose support. There are some signs that she is losing some support, so that may have an impact to certainly whittle that lead down. I don't think it's going to cause her to lose Michigan. And right now, if Donald Trump were to win all of the states that are toss-ups, and Florida and Ohio and Iowa are close, and Arizona. If he were to win all of the toss-up states, he would still need to flip either a Michigan or a Pennsylvania in order to get to the 270 electoral votes.
And do you think that that's possible to be Michigan?
Right now, I would say no, although obviously Donald Trump has just said that he believes he can win Michigan.
Right. Okay, now Clinton herself, she is kind of under a president who has good approval ratings right now. So does she get a boost from that?
President Obama is at the highest favorability rating he has ever had in Michigan, with the exception of when he was first elected. His job rating is positive, 53%. And while that has helped her, I think that has already taken place in terms of the impact that he would have on the electorate. He has helped with millennial voters, helping her to increase from a very close matchup she had in the four-way with Johnson getting almost as many votes as Donald Trump. So the impact, I think, has already been felt. And now the question is, to what extent, because of the FBI revelation, will she lose votes? Will it be enough to cause her to lose a Michigan or lose a Pennsylvania? It may have already impacted some of the votes in other states.
And speaking of that, we all know that this election cycle has been rocked by bombshells. So do polls follow that? Do they react to that? Or are they pretty consistent with voters who've made up their minds?
At this juncture, voters have pretty well made up their mind. However, it can have an impact. Historically, all of the October surprises have had only a 1 or 2 point impact in terms of election outcomes. And so it is probably unlikely that a word or a phrase that I hate, but it has probably been baked into the consciousness of the voter enough so that it is unlikely to change. But anything is possible, especially in this election.
Right. Now, something that I personally found interesting in the polls is the question, are you voting for your candidate or are you voting against the other candidate? Is that a question that you always ask, or is that specific to this election cycle? Because of the personalities involved and because both candidates have high unfavorable ratings, this is the first time in history that we've ever had two candidates who are so unpopular. And to a very large extent, it is deciding between the lesser of two evils for many, many voters, and those who are still undecided have to make that decision. Well, it's certainly been an interesting one, that's for sure. Yes. All right, thanks for being with us. Glad to be here. Sherry, back to you.
Thank you, Lauren. Our 6 News Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic dug deeper into the numbers from the most recent poll here in Michigan to see who is supporting each candidate. He's here for you with a look at both sides' strengths and weaknesses.
Mid-Michigan is voting for Donald Trump. He's got a 17-point lead. In West Michigan, traditionally strong Republican territory, he has a lead, but only by 3 points. It's Mr. Trump dominating northern Michigan by 17 points, but in southeast Michigan, where the votes are plenty, Ms. Clinton holds a 24-point lead. Mr. Trump wins Macomb County, but she wins Oakland and Wayne. The gender gap has been narrowed. Ms. Clinton has lost support among middle-aged women, but still holds a 15-point lead. That's down 5 points. She had a lead with men, but Mr. Trump has bounced back, has only a 3-point lead, however, with those voters. On the education front, Mr. Trump's strong base of less educated voters has slipped away. She now has a 9-point lead with them and a 9-point lead with college-educated voters. On the issues, when you look at the voters who feel jobs is most important to them, she beats him by 13 points. Wages, she wins on that. Mr. Trump, however, beats her on trade by 18 points, and on national security, he continues his lead. Mr. Trump once had a commanding lead with independent voters, but now the two candidates are tied. Finally, 65% of the voters supporting Ms. Clinton say they are doing so because they like her. 30% say they're voting for her because they don't like him. But Mr. Trump has 44% of his voters supporting him, but 43% voting for him because they don't like her. Welcome to a very unusual election. Here for you in Lansing, Tim Skubic, 6 News.
Trump and Clinton aren't the only ones people say they're voting for here in Michigan. Recent numbers show third-party candidates Gary Johnson and Jill Stein combining for 12% of the vote in our state. Johnson is the former governor of New Mexico. He's the candidate for the Libertarian Party, and he's also in the 2012 presidential election. He ran then. Johnson's campaign platform is built on financial reform. He wants to put an end to income taxes and has even talked about abolishing the IRS. He calls our $20 trillion national debt obscene and says if he were president, his first act would be to submit a truly balanced budget to Congress. Johnson says he would also remove marijuana from its Schedule I status under federal law. He claims that would allow states to make their own decisions for potentially legalizing it. The last poll shows him with 9% support in Michigan. Green Party candidate Dr. Jill Stein is polling at 3% in our state, and like Johnson, she also ran in 2012. Stein puts a heavy emphasis on taking action for climate change. Stein's platform includes pushing for free universal child care. She also wants free tuition at all public universities. When it comes to minimum wage, Stein wants to set it at $15 an hour. Well, even though they're only polling at a combined 12%, third-party candidates can still have a major effect on the outcome of the election. We asked Michigan State University political science professor Matt Grossman for his take on which party could be losing out from Gary Johnson, polling at nearly 10%.
There isn't a clear nationwide trend, but I think, I think he's taking disproportionately from Republicans in Michigan. I think in some places like New Mexico is his home state, he's taking maybe disproportionately from Democrats there. But there hasn't been an overwhelming trend. And even sometimes we tell the story, we remember it a little bit differently than it occurred. So, for example, Ross Perot, people think, well, he was taking disproportionately from Republicans. And it's true that many of his activists came out of Republican support, but the actual voters who voted for Ross Perot split evenly when exit pollsters asked them who was their second preference. So it was pretty even. Even Ralph Nader, who today is remembered as a liberal activist, the polls really only showed about 2/3 who would have chosen Gore afterwards. So that was enough to make a difference in Florida and other states. But it's not always the case that they're pulling overwhelmingly from one party.
Presidential politics also have major trickle-down effects on local races across the country. Our Justin Cree and Tim Skubic have more details about how it's playing out here in Michigan.
And Tim, what effect does Donald Trump have on local Republicans?
Good question. I'm not sure what the answer is, which means Trump is an X factor in this election.
Okay.
He will play well in some districts. In fact, we talked to the guy who's running the House campaign. He said of the 17 seats or so that are in play, 9 of them, Donald Trump is a plus, clearly. 4 to 5 of them, Trump is neutral. But then here's the key. There's 3 or 4 races where Trump could actually hurt the Republican candidates. And as the Democrats are trying to get to 9, they may use Mr. Trump to climb on his back to get control. That's why he's an X factor. And until we count the votes, we don't know whether it's a plus or the minus for the D's or the R's.
Speaking of the effect Donald Trump may have on some Republicans, ads supporting 8th Congressional District candidate Susanna Shrelly are trying to tie Republican Mike Bishop to controversial comments Donald Trump has made. Haley Herzog joins us for a breakdown of this race.
When it comes to experience, Representative Bishop says not only does he have time on his side, but also accomplishments.
I was the first freshman to get a bill passed. signed into law by the president, the high cost of higher education, addressing that for the millennials and parents out there who are struggling through that.
Susanna Shkreli joined the race last minute, but as a Macomb County prosecutor, she says her experience serving the law and, more importantly, the people makes her the best candidate.
That has given me the tenacity to take on the tough fights to Congress and to fight for Michigan's middle-class families.
Bishop says there are 3 issues that he has stood up for while in Congress and will continue to tackle if reelected. The first is the economy and job growth.
Making it an environment in this country that encourages business and job growth rather than penalizes it.
Next is strong national security.
The primary function of government is to secure the safety of its citizens, and that really is my focus.
And not only is he focused on safety, but the health of his constituents as well.
You need to repeal and replace Obamacare with a patient-centered, straightforward system that makes health care actually affordable and accessible.
With the burden of student loans still on her back, Shkreli says affordable education is not just important for students, but can make a major impact on the state as a whole.
We need to make sure that we're working with our students so that they're able to invest in Michigan's 8th district.
Shkreli is also focusing on growing jobs in the state, especially when it comes to the manufacturing industry and the protection of workers.
Safeguards for workers' wages, environmental protections, human rights protections.
Both candidates believe it's their duty to not just hear what their constituents have to say, but to put words into action.
I want to give them a voice, like I do in the courtroom every single day for women and children and people who are in danger.
We ought to be taking the advice and counsel from those on the outside who see it better than we do.
Bishop and Shkreli both say their main priority is their promise to the people. Here for you in Lansing, Haley Herzog, 6 News.
And that's not the only hard-fought race happening for Congress right now. You've probably seen the barrage of ads for and against 7th Congressional District candidates Tim Walberg and Gretchen Driscoll. Here's our Jackson Bureau reporter Aaron Dimmick with a closer look at these candidates.
It's a big district. Looking at this map, you can see that it starts in Monroe, cuts across southern Michigan, and includes parts of suburban Ann Arbor and Lansing. But the heart of this district is Jackson County. That's where I met up with both of the candidates, who are working very hard to get your vote.
Gretchen Driscoll's looking out for the middle class.
Turning on a TV this election season, it's hard not to be bombarded with election ads. Many from the incumbent, Tim Walberg.
I'm Tim Walberg, and I approve this message.
The Republican pastor from Lenawee County has been elected to this seat for 4 terms. Walberg says he's advocated for workforce development and pushed back against government regulation.
Public service certainly drives me, and a love for this country. The foundational principles of this country give so much freedom, and they're being pushed on, and some are being targeted.
His opponent is Democrat Gretchen Driscoll. She's a former mayor of Saline and has served Washtenaw County in the State House for 4 years. Driscoll says her achievements include working closely with communities on things like jobs and rural internet.
I believe in that all of us can help make the world a better place. I passionately believe in that. And to be honest, I am frustrated with the leadership and the lack of representation.
Multiple ads have attacked Walberg on trade deals, branding him Trade Deal Tim.
Tim Walberg has one word for trade deals: yes.
They say Walberg hurt Michigan workers by voting for every trade deal he's come across.
So will you represent your constituencies like I did? Or will you posture on trade and not give us the chance to have 95% of the consumer base, which is outside of the United States? And then to say that I supported TPP, it's wrong.
Numerous reports show Walberg voted to fast-track trade deals so they could quickly come up for votes in Congress. But Walberg says that doesn't mean he actually supports the trade deals like the controversial Trans-Pacific Partnership. Walberg has hit back with ads of his own.
She lied on her resume about being a CPA and real estate broker.
Driscoll says it's all a misunderstanding.
What happened with the broker-agent situation is that I have never said that I was a managing or associate broker, but broker and agent are used interchangeably.
The 7th Congressional District is seen as a hotly contested race, with money pouring in from out-of-state interests. The top of the ticket also looms large, with the possibility of presidential candidates helping or hurting those down the ballot. If he's reelected, Walberg says he'd work to help businesses thrive.
I look forward to going back and being a propositional party member and moving this country in a direction that makes sense and provides the greatest freedom and opportunity for our individuals.
Driscoll says if she's chosen by voters, she'll go to D.C. with Michigan families in mind.
They do need a voice in Washington, and they don't have it right now. And they're really worried, and they want to see something different. We really need somebody that really cares and listens and would be their voice.
Recent polls indicate this is a close race, but as always, we'll have to see what happens on Election Day. Here for you in Jackson, Aaron Dimmick, 6 News.
Coming up next, we're turning to a showdown for a seat in the State House. Our 6 News political correspondent will be here for you with a look at what's at stake and how it could impact control of the House. Plus, you'll hear from the candidates squaring off for Ingham County Sheriff about why they think they're the best choice to help keep your family safe. That's all still ahead on Campaign 2016. Your vote, their views. Welcome back. A Democrat who lost her seat to a Republican is trying to win it back in a hotly contested race in the State House. We sent 6 News Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic into the 71st House District for this look at the rematch between Representative Tom Barrett and Teresa Abed.
These two politicians are certainly not strangers. Teresa Abbott won this seat 4 years ago, but then 2 years ago, Tom Barrett beat her by 146 votes.
I think education certainly is one. I think roads is another one. And I think jobs and the economy is always pressing on people's minds.
And there's just that very frustrated feeling of, you know what, policies and legislation keeps being passed, but it's not helping us.
Voters want to know, why is one candidate better than the other?
I am so connected with the community. I mean, I've lived here for 30 years. I've been a school social worker, so I've been embedded in our community.
Well, I've had legislative accomplishments. Frankly, my opponent has had none. I've focused on issues that I am most capable of addressing. I'm the only Iraq war veteran in the State House of Representatives.
Democrats are trying to pick up 9 seats in the House to regain control. This race is a must-win for the Ds. And the Democrats are trying to pressure Republican candidates to unendorse Mr. Trump. Will Mr. Barrett do that?
Do you denounce Mr. Trump's candidacy?
I do not. I certainly do not support everything Mr. Trump has said.
This is something that is huge and that we need to make sure that we say this is appalling.
So you think he should denounce Mr. Trump?
Well, I do think he should denounce what he has been saying.
As for fixing the roads and a gas tax hike,
I voted yes on the increase for the gas tax to invest more money into our infrastructure.
I definitely would have voted no.
And then there was the governor's plan to extend insurance to the uninsured, the so-called Medicaid expansion.
I wasn't there for that.
If you had been.
Well, Tim, I wasn't there for it, so I wasn't there for the debate that took place.
I was a yes vote, yes, and I'm proud of that because it allowed more people to get medical coverage.
Finally, what do they like about the other?
I think my opponent's a nice lady. My opponent had the exact same opportunity to serve our district and couldn't pass a single legislative accomplishment at all.
He's trying to be involved.
He said when you were there, you got nothing passed.
I think that that's so disingenuous. They were not going to let me pass one thing.
I'm Justin Cree. I'm joined by 6 News Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic. And Tim, what's at stake when it comes to control of the Michigan House?
Well, let's first of all, Justin, define what control means. Whichever political party has control of the House, that is over 56 votes, they get basically to call all the shots. And for 6 years, the Republicans have been calling all the shots in the House. Here's the Democratic assignment. They need to pick up 9 seats in November, and that's a heavy lift. That's a lot of seats that need to change. But if they can, they will take control of the House, and the Republicans will become the minority party. It will change the dynamics, the relationship with the governor and the Senate. So there's a lot at stake in this election.
When our special reports continue, we'll take you inside a hard-fought battle for the job of Eaton County Sheriff. And later, we'll turn to the Ingham County prosecutor race, where 2 women are vying to make history. That's next on Campaign 2016, Your Vote, Their Views. Welcome back. It's one of the most contentious elections in mid-Michigan. The race for Eaton County Sheriff sees an incumbent squaring off with a former undersheriff to try and keep his job. Eaton County Sheriff Tom Reich is running for re-election. He's dealt with some tough times during his tenure. Reich led the department through the controversies surrounding the shooting death of Devin Guilford. His campaign was also investigated by the state for using thousands of dollars of donated items to give away at fundraisers. Reich says it was a simple mistake and returned those donations. Reich's opponent has also faced tough times away from his campaign. Democrat Fred McPhail's 15-year-old son is facing criminal sexual conduct charges after prosecutors say he and another teen sexually abused a child under the age of 13. Well, there's another law enforcement race happening nearby in Ingham County as longtime Sheriff Gene Rigglesworth retires. His son is running to fill his father's shoes, but he's facing an opponent who was a captain in the Sheriff's Department until this last year. Our Alexander Illich sat down with both candidates who claim their time on the force makes them the best choice.
I just wanted to stop by and introduce myself. My name's Scott Rigglesworth. I'm running for the office of Ingham County Sheriff.
Meet Scott Rigglesworth.
Been in the community for 46.
Hi, ma'am. How are you? My name's Eric Trojanowicz. I'm running for Ingham County Sheriff.
And Eric Trojanowicz.
I was endorsed by the Capital City Labor Union.
The two men have a couple things in common. They're members of law enforcement, and they both want your vote as they hope to be elected the next Ingham County Sheriff.
I believe that us as law enforcement, especially with all the negativity that's going on, is we need to get that trust back from the community.
A big part of my life is the law enforcement profession, and I think being sheriff, that you have to be an ambassador in this community for law enforcement.
Scott Rigglesworth is the Democratic candidate with more than 22 years in law enforcement. He's currently a lieutenant at the East Lansing Police Department. In his time with the ELPD, Rigglesworth says he's led initiatives to combat distracted driving,
Watched you continue to text at the light.
And created a behavioral assessment unit in the police department.
I've always been good at kind of being forward thinking and anticipating problems that may come up and trying to institute solutions before something even is a problem, and I think I'm good at that.
When he takes off his uniform, he doesn't stop his involvement in the community.
I sat on the Holt School Board for 6 years. I'm the treasurer of the 100 Club, which raises money for the families of fallen police and fire in the Tri-County areas.
Under my leadership at the Sheriff's Office, we started developing regional teams. We developed a regional dive team, which incorporates area agencies.
Eric Trojanowicz is the Republican candidate with 25 years of law enforcement under his belt. He was captain at the Ingham County Sheriff's Office before he retired earlier this year. The Sheriff's Office is all he knows.
I've come up through the Sheriff's Office. I know what it takes to make the cuts at the Sheriff's Office.
When he wasn't on the streets fighting crime, Trojanowicz was on the basketball court coaching kids at Lansing Catholic. Both candidates have a vision for the future of the Sheriff's Office when it comes to priorities in policing.
My priorities are safety, service, and solutions. I mean, they're short-staffed. They don't have nearly enough road deputies in the out county or the 13 rural townships that they police. You know, they could use more deputies in corrections, and I want to build on those programs that the current sheriff has built, and I want to rethink those that maybe aren't working.
My first priority is to get more road patrol out to the citizens of Ingham County. As of right now, we only put 1 to 2 cars out a shift. So my goal as the sheriff of Ingham County is to get more people, more road patrol out into the communities, interacting with them, because we need to work together to solve crimes in our communities. Basically, it's time for a change. I mean, the current sheriff's done a tremendous job. I don't have any complaints about what he's done at the sheriff's office, but there comes a time when there needs to be a change, and right now is the time.
My opponent is running on it's time for a change, and I would say I'm the change. He's the establishment.
That was Alexander Illich reporting. There's another vote dealing with local law enforcement that's happening right here in Lansing. The city's asking for a renewal of a multi-million-dollar public safety millage that's about to expire. The last millage raised about $8 million to help the police and fire departments in Lansing. This is only a millage renewal, so it would not raise property tax rates if it passes. Lansing Mayor Virg Bernero says if the renewal is not approved, there will be serious staffing issues. The millage was first added back in 2011 as a way to make up for budget shortfalls left behind from the recession. Well, speaking of public safety, when it comes to keeping criminals off the streets, prosecutors take the reins when the cases head to court. Coming up next, you'll meet the candidates in the race to take over the job of Ingham County prosecutor and hear why they are ready to make history no matter who wins. Campaign 2016, your vote, their views. We'll be back after this. Welcome back. We've told you how Hillary Clinton has been holding a lead in the polls in our state for the past few months. But are those numbers enough to take Michigan out of play as a battleground state? We go back now to an interview with John Dickerson of Face the Nation for his response. How does the apparent loss of our battleground state status impact the election?
Well, you know, Michigan is kind of firmly in the blue column, so Donald Trump thought for a moment that he might be able to maybe make inroads into Michigan and other states in the Midwest. Right now, it looks like his best shot is in Ohio. But it's, you know, right now, the focus is on those other battleground states. Pennsylvania seems to be getting all the attention this time around.
Did you know that millennials make up almost 30% of the voting age population in our state? Well, that could be the reason we've seen a lot of attention paid to getting college students to step up and vote. We've seen the candidates' kids and celebrities come to Michigan State University's campus to rally for their side. Former Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders has made it to Michigan State University twice now, once before he won the Michigan Democratic primary and again last month to campaign for his former rival. Both times, Sanders pushed plans to make college more affordable and in some cases free.
Ask the people of Michigan whether they think we should raise the minimum wage to a living wage. They do. Ask the people of Michigan whether they think we need pay equity for women. They do. Ask the people of Michigan whether we should make public colleges and universities tuition free for the middle class so their kids can go to college and not leave school deeply in debt. They do.
Still ahead tonight, we're checking back in with 6 News Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic for his final thoughts on this wild presidential campaign season. Plus, we'll have a last-minute look at what you need to know before you head to the polls. Stay with us. Welcome back. You've heard from the candidates and our team of political experts for analysis of the races. And right now we go back to our 6 News Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic for his take on this year's campaign season.
This has been one of the ugliest presidential races in recent memory. You can't think of one that's been this nasty between the two opponents. I think what concerns me most has to do with the news media. I think we got caught up in the personality game in this election, playing her off of him and vice versa, and we really didn't have a lot of substantive discussions about the issues. Now, in one of the debates, the second debate was quite good. The vice presidential debate was excellent. They did talk about the issues, but because of Mr. Trump and because of Ms. Clinton and the people whom they are being very unpopular, the media gravitated to the easy sell, which was, here's what he said, here's what she said, they don't like one another, back and forth. I'm not sure that did a full service to the electorate to provide you with the kind of information you need to cast an intelligent vote.
All right, thank you, Tim, for that insight. Now, we also asked Michigan State University political science professor Matt Grossman for his biggest takeaway from the 2016 presidential campaign.
I mean, I think what the big takeaway still is that the Republicans took a very winnable election that should be 50-50, and they nominated a candidate that was the least popular among their choices, and they're losing some percentage of the vote as a result of that decision. We just don't know how much that is, and if it's going to be enough to make them lose the election. But I would say overall, Republicans have been doing 4 or 5% less than they should have, given pretty much any of their other candidates for president. So if Trump wins, it will be because the Republicans were in pretty good shape to win an election after the Democrats had held the White House for 2 terms. If Trump loses, it very well could be the case that another Republican candidate could have won.
That was Matt Grossman. Now, we've told you how some people are heading to the polls to vote for a candidate and how others are casting their ballots against another. Well, tonight, we ask this question: why do you vote? We turn to our WLNS Facebook page for a look at some of your responses. Kelly writes, I vote to exercise my part of our government, being by the people. I have voted in every election since I turned 18. My candidate doesn't always win, but I can always say I did my part. Sharon's take is simple. She says, quote, I vote because I have a right to vote, period. As part of her comment, Melissa said she votes because her great-grandparents and female relatives fought too hard for her not to. If you are heading to the polls on Tuesday, here's what you need to know before you go. First, you need to make sure that you know where you're registered to vote. You can find out on the Secretary of State's website or look at your voter registration card. You'll also find sample ballots online so you can know what you'll be deciding on and then make your decisions ahead of time. If you can't make it out to vote during the day, make sure that you're in line by 8 o'clock at night when the polls close. Now, just a few other things to keep in mind. You are allowed to bring your kids to the polls. State law says you can bring your children into the voting booth with you. Finally, although you are not required to have a photo ID to vote, it will make the process a whole lot quicker if you do. We hope that tonight's reports have given you a better insight into the candidates and the issues that you'll see on the ballot come Tuesday. It's safe to say that this has been an election season unlike anything we've ever seen. And now the decisions are in your hands. All of us here at TV6 want to take this opportunity to ask you to go to the polls, to cast your vote. It's one of the most important things we can do as Americans, and it's something that will impact our nation's future for generations to come. We'll be here for you on election night with all of the results, so stay with 6 News for our continuing campaign coverage. Thank you for joining us.
Campaign 2016, Your Vote, Their Views, has been an exclusive presentation of WLNS 6 News.